All right, so I had a request on BGG. Uh, Someone has asked me to push some counters around, maybe go through the base rules. Um, he and his wife just got this game, and they thought maybe a little basic rules help would help them jump into this game and get to playing it. Yeah, these of course we all know bird games they're very 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 detailed, a lot of rules to them, and of course the GBACW ones within GMT they're really really deep in the rules, which is great because it adds to the realism of how things happen. So I thought what I'd do is pulled out First Kernstown from Death Valley and laid out some counters here, and maybe we'll go through the rules and just kind of get some basic ideas here. So I'll be doing a lot of pausing and starting and pausing and starting just to cover things. So first I thought we'd go over the counters. All right, so let's just go quick rundown. All right, those are efficiency counters. You have a predetermined number for each scenario, which it'll provide it for you right there. So for First Kernstown, the Union gets 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s. And the Confederates get 1 2 and 2 3s. All right, so there you are. Those will go in a cup, and you will draw them blindly. Okay. Then you have your activation markers, and these are for the units. I have the artillery out. See, the Confederate artillery that I have pulled right now is all directly assigned to Jackson's division. So they can activate with the division. There are a lot of instances, though, where your artillery is not, maybe it's away from command, and you can activate them with those artillery. In most games, you'll put three artilleries in the cup, and those artilleries that are not under a direct command, they'll activate on that shit. Probably won't use those in this, but keep that in mind. It works just like any other activation shit lines for artillery. I pulled shields for the Union because that's all the troops I'm going to have on the board for this one. And I got their artillery ones, and I don't have any of the Union artillery out. And then both sides will have a march counter, and that's for units that are in march mode, all right, on the board or coming in as reinforcements. They don't activate with their division activation. They activate on that march chit. It took me a little while to figure out why that is, and I found out that it helps you not have confusion if you've got a bunch of columns on a road moving. If you have one of Jackson's division on the road, and behind him you have, let's say, Johnson's division, and you pull Johnson's division AM, and you try to go move those guys that are behind Jackson, well, the road's blocked. So when you have them under march order, if you activate them on the march order, then you can move, the commands as you see fit. So that works. And then you have a random event. I've had those in all my games. I think maybe I've hit one, and that's just, you got a chart that if you pull that chit, you got a chart, or maybe you roll a dice to see what happens, and then it'll give you some weird event like, I don't know, 4 buzzards fly down and smack Shields in the head and knock him off his horse, and he loses 1 activation per turn. It'll be stuff like that. Some of it's pretty interesting. Like in the Gettysburg game, I think they got like John Burns and stuff like that. So that's what that's for. And there are some really, like I think Gettysburg has one where Imboden's cavalry shows up. So yeah, that can be kind of fun. You don't necessarily have to use that, but that can be kind of fun. Some games you won't use it. All right, so let's look at some of the combat units. All right, so there's Shields. He's the 4th Division Commander for the Reserve Corps. There's a cavalry unit within that division. It's in the 4th Brigade. And the cavalry units will have 2 units. They'll have their mounted side, and then they'll have their dismounted side, where they're just like infantry. Only don't mistake them for infantry because they're not nearly as effective. And you'll see on there, so you've got your strength, which is usually in 50 points, or 50 men. So that 3 up there is like 150 men. All right. The number in the purple box in the middle is their cohesion. Higher the better. And then their movement points on the right. And the little black circle is the weaponry they're carrying. You'll notice he doesn't have any weaponry when he's mounted, but he's got carbines when he's dismounted. So that your weapon type's important in this game because that's how you get your multipliers and the distances the units can shoot. All right, so let's look at a couple of the brigades here. So, all right, so I've got Carroll. He is the 4th Brigade, 4th Division of the Reserve Corps. Now, these units to the left are his regiments, and the units to the right are. Now, these units to the right, you notice the top one is an 8, and it's the 1st West Virginia. and the bottom two are 1st West Virginia A and 1st West Virginia B. That's a breakdown. So you'll use either the top unit or you'll use the 2 bottom units. It's usually the player's choice, whatever you want to do. We're going to use the top unit for this sort of demo. All right. There's another one right here. What is that? The 5th Ohio. He's 8 strength points. You break him down. He's 2 4s. And then here's a big one. And that's the reason why I'm going to use the big ones. I'm going to show you how extended line and all that works. And that's the, 84th Ohio. He's a 12 and he breaks down to 2 6s. So just keep that in mind when you come across, if you come across in one of your games, oh, here's the 1st Ohio, he's a 14. Wait a minute, here's a 1st Ohio A and a 1st Ohio B. Just remember, you use either the A and the B or use the original one. All right, so the leaders. Okay, so Shields, all right, he's a division commander normally, but he's also your overall commander in this battle. All right. So he's got 3 numbers on the right there. The brigade coordination up top is a die roll modifier for when you want to combine brigades to work as if they were one, and you'll understand that later. The second one is his command range, and then the third one is his. I gotta look again. Oh, it's his orders. His orders modifier or orders rating, and of course you'll see he has a 0, so he's not gonna. When you do a brigade change orders because you forgot to give orders that you needed in the division orders phase, and when a brigade goes to activate, you might need to change their orders. He might be able to add a modifier to it, but you can see he's not. Or he might be able to give extra activation to his division. Well, he's not because he's a 0. Whereas Mr. Jackson over here, he has a +1. Right? He also has a 1 for brigade coordination. So if he wanted to activate these 2 brigades here together, he's going to get a die roll modifier of +1, which is good. Okay. He also has the +1 for division orders. All right, and his command range is 8, so he's definitely superior in command to Shields in this game. All right, let's see. There's an artillery commander. I don't have any Union artillery on the board, but Down can actually control the artillery in the 4th Division. Which they probably got 6 or 7 batteries in that division. I probably should have pulled some out, but I didn't. So he actually acts like another brigade commander, like Carroll and like Tyler, but he's for the artillery. All right. So Carroll, as a brigade commander, he affects all those units there that have the purple in their behind their cohesion. It matches him. All right. He has 3 numbers on his counter. All right, the top one on the right, the letter, is his, he's a neutral leader when you go to do brigade change orders. You might get this thing that's called loose cannon. And also during shock combat, that letter will have an effect in shock combat. Now, neutral won't. All right, but that helps you determine what happens when he goes loose cannon, and you got to roll to see what he makes his brigade do when they failed to change orders. And you'll see here it's neutral also for Tyler. Now, of course, the second number in there in the black circle, that's their command range. And the bottom order is their, I guess you would call that their brigade orders rating, because these are brigade commanders. And we'll explain how that works later. Okay. So, and then you got, like I say, there's different infantry regiments with their weapon types, with their strengths. So 7 right there, that's 350 men. All right. So it's 50 points apiece. So, yeah, 750 men, or 350 men. 300 men for that. Okay, and then the Confederate brigades with their regiments. Then we got 2 brigades. Then we got, somebody corrected me on this. And I know I'm not even going to try to say it. I read it to Taliaferro, but somebody straightened me out on how he actually pronounces his name. And I'm sure somebody will remind me. That's in Campbell. So Jackson has 2 brigades under his command, well, for this purpose. And you'll see that these guys are both neutrals. Command range is a 4, and their brigade orders rating is, they have nothing. Okay. Now, artillery. Okay. So some of these games you'll see here, like the Charlottesville has Charlottesville A, B, and C. All right, all 3 of those together are 1 battery, but each one of those is a section. So you've got the A section, B section, C section, but all 3 together make up 1 battery. And you need to keep that in mind when you're playing, because there's rules about combined fire. You know, these guys need to stack together and move together, and they fire together. So artillery, when shooting at ranges of more than 3 hexes, I think it's 4 or more, if they're all alone in a hex, and it doesn't matter how many batteries, they can fire 12 guns out of that hex. All right, I'm not going to go into the deep rules about, you'll have to read through the rules about the number of strength points that can fire out of a hex, because there's different variations if there's artillery with infantry or cavalry or dismounted cavalry. I could spend 2 hours just talking about that. So just make sure you read the rules. They're not that hard to understand. Maybe it just takes a little while to remember, but it's very important. Also remember that artillery has to be the top unit in a stack to fire. Infantry can be underneath the artillery, and there's a possibility that they can still fire if you meet the numbers, the stacking numbers. And like I said, you read that, you'll grasp that pretty easily. So keep that in mind. Artillery's got to be on top to fire. Okay. Like I said, I want to try to make this basic, because like I said, you could do this for a week to try to cover all the rules. All right, let's look at some of the charts. So here's the Union player chart. Turn record track. It's got shields as the efficiency box. It's got what activation markers in play. You got, and I never use either one of those. I usually lay them out on the map so I can see which order I've gone in. Union route regroup box, Union eliminated box. Eliminated, that's pretty self-explanatory. The route and regroup box, you get a unit that routes. It's not like your older bird games like Terrible Swift Sword where you put a routed marker or you flip them to the routed side. They actually come off the map. So, I mean, they're like, I don't know, maybe it's to control density of counters on the map, but some of these bigger games definitely. Like 3 Days of Gettysburg is massive. You get all these, if you had a bunch of routed units on it, they'd just be more of a mess to deal with. So they actually come off the board, and the only way you can get them back in is to you rally them in reserve status. If the brigade is in reserve status and it's nighttime or something, or they've spent the reserve status for the whole turn, you can roll to see if you can recover them and bring them back in. Victory point track, I'm not going to mess with that. That's pretty much self-explanatory in the rules. And then the Confederate one's pretty much the same thing. Okay. All right. So just pause for a second here. We'll come back and we'll start going through the sequence of plays so you can get an idea of how that works. Be back shortly. All right, here we go. So let's start getting into the rules. Now I think Death Valley comes with the right rule set, but from the GMT site you can get the 2019 Living Rules, and actually one of the gentlemen that's responsible for this or has a hand in this, or maybe he's the master of this, he actually watches some of these videos. So if I get something backwards, I'm sure he'll straighten me out and get the right thing. But yeah, these are the 2019 Living Rules. I know that there are some errata to this. I'm not sure if it's been posted or not yet, but that's what I recommend because it'll help you with all the games. Plus, there's rules changes that make the game even more efficient. But we're going to start going with this. So we'll start going through the initiative segment, and that's just simply who's going to go first. It's a dice roll. Maybe you can have a modifier, which you'll see. Usually it's with let me go back over here. Usually when you have like a corps commander or your overall commander. Well, in this case, Jackson's the overall commander and Shields the overall commander. So that rep +1 rating down there, you have to read through the play rules, but I would assume that he can add that to the initiative roll. So you'd roll the 2 dice, 1 Confederate, 1 Union. Whoever has the highest, they get the initiative. Now what that means is when you start actual play, he gets to choose an activation, pull it from the cup, and that'll be the first activation of the game. So there's no random draw on that one. They start, he will conduct the first activation. I think ties, if you tie, I don't know, it might be specific to the games, but if you tie, it's either, see, I get games mixed up. So I think if you tie, it's whoever went first the last turn. Whoever had initiative on the last turn, they maintain it. So every turn, one player has the initiative where they get to choose their first activation. And that can be key. You know, if you need to move somebody first because you left a hole in a line somewhere and you need to plug it, because you know darn well that if one of those Confederate units or the enemy units activates, they're going to blow through that hole. So you need to plug it before. So that can be key. That's just a situation right there to consider. All right, so you determine initiative, then you do your order segment. So in your order segment, you're determining the chain of command, okay? To determine if your division leaders, brigade leaders, and individual units are within their chain of command. So, guess I should have put these on the board. All right, hold on, pause for 1 second. Okay, so I put some of the troops out on the board there. Try to keep this minimal. All right, so here's old Stonewall, and he's sitting back here on this high ground here behind. Put the other leader up in here. Where's he at? Put Talia. I'm going to call him Taliaferro, but I know I'll get straightened out. Okay, so this is where you check your chain of command. Okay, so in this game, Jackson is the overall commander. All right. So your chain of command starts at the regiments or the batteries, whichever. It goes through their brigade leader and then to their division leader. And then from the division leader to, when you have them, to the corps leader. Okay. That's what you like in Gettysburg, you're going to have Lee on the map, but he doesn't really affect the chain of command. He has bonuses that he can apply to things, but it starts with your corps commanders. Now, this game here, there are no corps commanders, so your chain of command in this game will be from the regiments to the brigade leaders to the division commander, which in this case, Shields and Jackson are also the overall commanders, or working down. So from Jackson to Taliaferro to Taliaferro's regiments. From Jackson to Campbell down to Campbell's regiments. That's your chain of command. All right, so in this situation here, Taliaferro is within the command range of Jackson. So he himself is in command. All his regiments are within his command range of 4. So all his regiments are in command. All right. All those artillery batteries are within the command range of Jackson, or that artillery battery, pardon me. All 3 sections, that one battery, are in command of Jackson. So those units are all good. Now, over here, Campbell, the brigade leader, is more than 8 movement points from Jackson using a leader's movement. So, I mean, if he was going straight across the field, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across the creek, up one slope, maybe different games have that different where it's +1 to go up slope. So he's not within command range. So you would go find one of your markers that say out of command, and you would mark his brigade as, sorry, I'm doing this with trying to do this handle so I can move around a little bit. Plus I had to turn that one light off, so I'm hoping the light for the video is working good. So now he's out of command. Okay, so the first thing everybody probably thinks is, well, he's not going to be worth a nickel this turn. Well, no, that's not true. And we'll explain to that in a minute. All right, so Campbell is there. Let's get Shields on the map. Where's Mr. Shields? Or do I have him on the map? Where are you at, Shields? There he is. And we'll say Shields is sitting right here. So Shields, he has a command range of 6. All right, so Carroll is definitely within range in all of Carroll's regiments. Now, the other thing that's cool here, too, is let's say that Campbell was sitting right here. All right, we'll say Campbell's sitting right there. So now, which I don't recommend you have them by, matter of fact, I think they have to be stacked, but we'll just use this as an example. So now Jackson's 8 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll say it's uphill 7, 8 to Campbell. So now Campbell's within his range. Well, are Campbell's regiments in range? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, and his command range is 4. So yes, that 1st regiment is in command range. So he is not out of command. The brigade and that regiment is not out of command. Also, since these regiments to the right are adjacent, it's like a link. So they are actually all in command because they are adjacent to the regiment that is in command. Now, assume this guy here was 1 hex away, he would be out of command. All right, but let's go back to the original setup where Campbell is out of command. If I can hang on to the units. Get tweezers. Especially when you're playing these games, get your tweezers. Okay. All right, so we've determined that everybody except for Campbell on this map is in command. All right. So now we're going to move on to the activation efficiency determination. All right, now here's how this works. And if you're going to be playing 2-player, make sure you do this with the hidden and I'll explain what that means. So, you have Shields and you have Jackson. You look at your charts. You have efficiency for Jackson, and you have efficiency for Shields. So you're going to put all your chits in a cup. You can put them in separate cups, Union, Confederate. You reach in, and let's say you're doing, let's see what the first one is here. All right, so this is a Union one. Now you'll see it has that side with that question mark on it. All right, but if you're playing two-player, you can look at it, but you probably want to make sure if you're playing two-player that you put that question mark facing up, because you don't want your opponent to know actually how many activations you actually have. All right, so he's a 2. So we're going to leave him face up for now. All right, then you got to get one for the Confederates. We'll just reach in and grab one. All right, so we got one for the Confederates, and Jackson gets a 3. All right, and like I say, remember, put them face down if you don't want your opponent, like I say, when you're playing two-player, to know what you're doing. I'm using my stabilizer here so the camera will spin, but I know it's been really, really good. All right, so let's talk about this. So what that means is that since Jackson is a division commander, every brigade will get 3 activations base. For Shields, it'll be 2. Now let's go look at the leaders. All right, so Jackson has that 1, okay? So see, if he was a corps commander, let's look at the book over here. Kernstown has different rules because there was no corps commander. So if Jackson were a corps commander, that top number would be an efficiency rating. So he would be able to take that efficiency rating and give one of his brigades an extra, that's in command range, an extra activation. So he drew 3, okay? He could literally, since Taliaferro's in command range, he could give Taliaferro 4 activations. So you got to remember now, we're working with brigades, a division commander brigades. So if Taliaferro were one of Jackson's, let's say Jackson was a corps commander and that was one of his divisions, he would be able to bump that division up to have 4 activations. All right. But in this environment, Jackson has 3, but he's got that +1. So he's going to increase his entire division up to 4 activations. All right, so how do you do that? Well, let's get these out of the cup. So you come over here to your AM markers, and Jackson, 4 is the most you can have. So you're going to take all 4 of Jackson's markers, and you're going to put them in that cup, okay? All right. All right, now let's take a look at Shields. We know Shields drew an efficiency of 2. He doesn't have any benefits, okay? But he gets 2 activations this turn. So you get down here, you're going to Shields. We're going to take 2 Shields, and we're going to throw them in the cup. Now you would also, at this time, you would take your march order. We'll throw them in there. And you would take your, depending on what the scenario says, you take your random event marker and throw it in there. And they all go in the same cup, because they'll just be random draws. Now remember, I told you for the initiative rating. So let's say that Jackson had the initiative. Well, I mean, he's going to go, Jackson's going to go first, all right? So you'll remove one of those Jackson chips, if that's the one you want to move first. That'll be the first activation of the turn, and it's not a blind draw. All right, so it's pretty simple from there. So you'll do after you set all the efficiency up, and after you do get your activation chits and put them in there, okay, which we got ours in the cup, and like I say, they all go in the same cup. All right, so Jackson's going to get 4, but that brigade over here that's out of command, here's the penalty they pay. They lose 1 activation, and you got to kind of keep that track yourself. So while Taliaferro will get 4, this brigade over here will only get 3 activations because he's out of command. Okay? So keep that in mind. That's pretty much how that works. All right, so now before you actually start pushing counters around, you're going to do your division orders. Okay. You've got, there's now 4 with Death Valley. You have what's called open order. So you have march order, which will usually be your reinforcements. Or if you want to put units into march order, they're on the map. I don't know. Maybe if you got to move somebody on a big map way around the flank or something like that, you might do that. Most times it's just the reinforcements coming on in march order. And you assign that on this phase, the division orders phase. So we want to do either march, advance, attack, or open order. I'm just learned about open order. I just used it in the 3rd Winchester. I just played that recently. You don't probably see too much of that here in these early battles. So, and what it does is when the Confederate strengths of the regiments are really, really small, you can spread them out. It's a late war thing. This is early war, so it probably doesn't apply here. So we'll go with 3. We'll go with march order, advanced order, and attack. All right, so march is obviously your big movement thing to make you move faster, use roads and stuff like that. You can also get road benefits while you're in advance order. You just have to apply the stacking limits that are implied for march order. Right? You can figure that one out through the rules pretty much yourself. But let's say for this one here, Taliaferro, we want him to go into attack mode. So during the division orders, as long as they're within command of their division leader, which is Jackson, and then, of course, if you had a corps commander, you'd have to go back. Your chain of command has to be solid from start to finish. Well, so in this case, it is, because Jackson is the biggest commander. So we're going to put Taliaferro in attack mode. We'll talk about the differences here in a minute. All right. He's out of command over here. So since we didn't have any marker on him, he's assumed to have been in advance orders. I don't know if I have. Yeah. They have them. You don't necessarily, usually in this game here, if they're not marked with an orders mark, like attack or march, then they're always in advance, but we'll use an advance orders for this one here. Okay, so the differences. All right, well, march, like I said, you read about that. That's just your big movement one. Okay. If you are in advanced orders, you cannot move into an enemy zone of control unless it's artillery by itself. Okay. In advanced orders, you can either fire or you can move. If you are in an enemy zone of control when your activation starts, I mean, obviously you're not going to move in there. You can stay in there, and you can fire, and you can melee. Okay. Attack orders, you can move and fire. So you could fire, and then you could move. You could move, fire, and then finish your move. You can move and not fire, and then shot combat under what they call charge. There's a lot of steps you got to go through to get to a charge, and get a +1 die roll if you don't fire, and then because you'll get the charge benefit. Okay. Your movement is cut in half when you are in attack. So those 6 movement points would become 3. Okay. There's no additional movement point to move into a zone of control. So these guys could physically move into the faces of Carroll, because I think it's +1 to cross the creek. All right, so we know that Jackson's going to do the first activation. We just did our division orders assignments. You do them for both sides. Carroll, we'll leave Carroll in advance mode. We'll put a marker over there, though, just to show it. If I can find another one. All right, so we'll leave Carroll in advance orders. Your divisional commanders and your they call it division orders because you're assigning them out to the brigades in a division. So we'll leave him in advance. So he's either going to shoot or he's going to move. Okay, so that takes care of division orders. All right, do that, and there will be cases where you will maybe change somebody's orders, or you'll sign an order, and then their activation will come up and something will have changed on the battlefield, and you'll need to change the unit's orders, okay? And we'll get to that here before long. All right, reinforcement orders, that's, you got your reinforcements coming on. You're going to put them in march orders. You're going to put them wherever their entry hex is, and then you'll just wait for the march order chip to be drawn. And then you have reserve placement, where you can place commands into reserve status. Reserve status, they get shot up pretty good, and you need to recover troops or arrest them or whatever. That's what you'll do. You'll put them into reserve. You can read the rules on that one at your own leisure. And then engineering, it's a rule that's been added in to start your build markers to indicate where breastworks are being constructed. Read that stuff too thoroughly about construction, because I think it changes with whatever year you're playing in, because there was things they didn't do early in the war that, like I know entrenchments and stuff happened later in the war, but I'm not even sure. I think it's just breastworks in this game, where you stack some logs, pile up some boulders, knock down some fence rails, rip a barn apart, and use the wood as a sort of a barrier, a defense work. All right, so that's pretty much that's called your order segment. And your order segment handles your check your chain of command, see who's out of command, who's in command. Do your efficiency drawings. Assign your division orders. Assign your reinforcement orders. Put units into reserve. And then start building your breastworks if you're going to do that. Okay? Next, we're going to start getting into the pushing counters, the activation segment. All right? We're going to take a quick break here and we'll come right back. Okay, so let's jump into activations. I'm going to try to do this statically. With the camera stationary, and I'll do my best to pull charts in. If I get something that messes you up, just holler at me. Okay, so we know that Jackson is our first activation, and you'll understand why I said I like to put the activation markers on the board, because they are important. The number of activations. So we know that Jackson's got he's going to get 4 because he has that +1, and we know that Shields' units will get 2. And we know that Jackson had the Confederates had the initiative, so they automatically get to pull their first chit. So we're going to start with Jackson, and we're only going to use the 1 brigade there. So we put Taliaferro in attack mode, and so we've got that 1 brigade sitting there, and we have 1 battery of artillery sitting in a hex by itself. Okay, so when you execute actions, you start with 1 brigade with 1 regiment, okay? If you do brigade coordination and you're successful at like tying 2 brigades together to function almost as 1, then you'll treat both brigades as if they were 1. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do Taliaferro as if he's in attack mode, and it's his activation. So he wants to get in there, let's say, and melee. He wants to shock combat. He wants to bust up that Union line. Well, he really doesn't have the strengths to do that. But what you can do is remember that in attack or advanced mode, you can have 15 strength points in a hex. Okay? What you can also do is when you see that 8 strength, if it's 8 or more, because the most fire strength points you can get out of 1 hex is 7. Okay? So that 8 unit right there, if he was going to shoot, he would only be able to fire 7 of his 8 points. All right, so let's say, though, you wanted to get all of that out of him. What you can do is you can put them into an extended line. So now he has become, let's shift all this stuff over a little bit here so you can see that. So he has now become, he's now covering 2 hexes with 4 strength points in each hex. All right, you have to read the rules. I don't know if it's +1 to do that or they can do that on the fly, if it takes one of their movement points or not. We'll say he started like that, though. So now he's got 2 4s. For shock combat, is that a good thing? No, not really. I try to avoid them as much as I can, but sometimes at some of these games you get some, my God, you might get some that are 17, 18, or 19 strength points, and you got to spread them into 3 hexes to cover all of that. So read the rules, like I say, on stacking and on the extended line. All right, but like to keep that in mind. If it's 8 or more, they can go to an extended line, and now you've got 2 4s. And you always, if it's like, say he was a 9 and you extended him, it would be 5 and 4. You always put the bigger number in the actual unit, okay? And this has its benefits, because if he moves up here 1, 2, okay, and he's only moved 2 movement points, now you want to fire, he can actually fire both combined, because they're the same regiment, at him. So now he would be firing 8 points at him, whereas if he moved up here by himself, he could only fire 7. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're using that. As long as the unit that's being fired at is in both of their frontal hexes, like this, he can fire all his, up to 7 in each hex, combined, because they're in the same regiment, at him. Okay? If they were like this, obviously this part of the extended line wouldn't be able to shoot at him. So he would only be able to fight. He's only got 4 now because they're extended, so he would only be able to shoot 4 into that guy. So you need to keep those things in mind when you're breaking these units down. Like I say, I will play for the most part when they're like 8, 9, or 10. I'll leave them like that. But you also got to remember that artillery that shoots at these guys when they're not an extended line from more than 3 hexes, they're going to get a plus die roll modifier at shooting at them. Okay. All right, so we'll just go ahead and we're going to move. So he moves up in here, 1, 2, and he's in attack mode, so he's going to fire. Like I said, I will try to do this the best I can. Let me get a dice out here. It's 8-sided dice, all right? 2 of them. Just happen to have a red and a blue. Huh. All right, let's get the combat chart out here. Probably not going to be able to see this. I will do my best. All right. So he is a musket. So you get your combat chart. Yeah, this isn't going to work. All right. Let me go back to handheld. Give me a second here. Get this stuff out of the way. All right. Get my handheld. All right. So he's going to fire. Let's take a look at the unit. All right. He is muskets. And he can only shoot 7. All right. Now, he has moved. So since he has moved, you have this thing called prepared fire. So he's not going to be able to do prepared fire because he moved. All right. So if you come over here to your chart, all right, find your muskets. There it is right there, second line. In the range. So he's going to shoot at 1 hex, so that's +2. He's going to get a +2 die roll modifier. If he had been using prepared fire, you see on the chart there, his maximum range is 2. And if he's 1 hex, so if he's adjacent, he can use prepared fire. Prepared fire is another +1 die roll modifier. But like I say, this guy moves, so he can't. All right, so he's got 7 points. He's a musket, so he's at point blank range. He's going to get +2. So he's going to roll on the 7 chart at +2. All right, now, this is where you take into the defender the terrain he's in, which I don't think up a minor elevation for fire combat. You get to know these charts. These terrain charts can be a little bit confusing, but up a minor slope for fire combat is no effect. Pull back. Is no effect. All right, so we're not getting any, and there's no density bonuses for small arms fire. Okay. So we know he's going to fire 7 strength points, point blank range, so he's going to +2 modifier. So you come down here. Where did my dice go? All right. And we're going to use the small arms, the 7 table, and we'll roll. And we roll a 4 + 2 is a 6. All right. So we'll come down here, we'll find 6, go across to the 6 to 8 table, and that is a D +2. So what that means is, now this is where this game gets a little tricky, and you gotta really keep your head on a swivel here. So his cohesion is a 5. All right. Fire combat, small arms fire combat happens simultaneously in this game. So no matter what this guy does to this unit, that state that he is currently in before he gets fired on, that is the state that he gets to fire back at before you apply damage to him. All right, so now he had a D +2, so you roll, and you roll a 5. So that means it's a 7. Now he's sitting there by himself. His cohesion is a 5. He'll get no modifiers. So his cohesion just got broke. So he just got disrupted. All right. Now, before you disrupt him, you're going to fire back. So he's got 6 muskets, point blank range. So that's +2. But he can use prepared fire. He's not moving. He's sitting still. There are exceptions to this game where you have like green units. They can't use prepared fire. Disrupted units cannot use prepared fire. But like I say, he gets to fire before you put him in because it fires simultaneous. So he gets +2, and he's going to get that prepared fire bonus. So if you come over here to your chart, you go down here and they have all the little modifiers. And you'll go through this a bunch of times looking for terrain. Is it sharpshooters? Are cannons shooting at something below it? Is it a mass target for artillery? And there's our prepared fire. So he's going to get a +1. So now he's getting a +3. He's going to be in the same column, 6 to 8, and he's going to get a +3. And he rolls a 0 is a 0 in this game. All right. So he gets a 0 +3, so he's going to roll a 3, and that's a D. That's a little d. So now the Confederate unit. All right, so he's fired. We'll go backwards. So we know that Union unit was disrupted. All right, no biggie. We flip him over to his disrupted side. Now we've already done our combat with him. Now the Confederate unit, he took a D result, a small d. So that is a disrupt on a die roll. He rolled, where we go? He rolled a 6. All right, and his cohesion, you'll see this in a lot of games. Confederate cohesion's a lot better, and he's a 7. So that Union fire didn't do anything to him. All right, so that takes care of the fire combat for those 2 units right there. Now, this unit, is in attack phase. He's in attack mode. So once I move all the regiments in the brigade, we'll be able to do shock combat. And shock combat's the one thing that you wait on till the end of moving that brigade, okay? Now let's say that this 8 had been sitting over here, and he was the only guy that moved, all right? So this regiment would have fired. Well, any regiment that is adjacent to him could fire at that unit even though he wasn't fired upon, as long as there's not another unit in one of his frontal hexes. Understand that? So as long as that guy's there, this guy shoots at him, he can't fire at him because he's got another unit in his front. So that's a little strategy thing that you can use, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, pull him back. All right, and he was over here. So those 2 guys, they've done their fire. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move. Now, that little 4-strength unit, he's not going to do much if he has to melee. And you need to keep in mind, or shot, I'm sorry, I keep saying melee, that's the old school, if he's going to shot combat, if he's going to hand-to-hand fight or charge in there. And any enemy unit that is in the zone of control of a shocking ally, they have to be shot combat. You have to cover them. All right. So we're going to take this group here, and we don't want one of these 4s to get charged in there by themselves. So as they're moving, we're going to take both of those. They're going to move together, okay? And they're going to go up in here, 1, and then they're going to cross that creek, 2, 3. All right? Oh, I'm sorry. No, we'll go over here. We'll put them on this side. They'll go in here, 2, 3. All right. So now and their leaders with them too. So now you just put 8 points in there. So when they go to shot combat, that 8 points is going to be worth a lot more. All right, let's say you don't want to fire with him. We want to keep that charge. Well, he's not shooting at nobody, so guess what? Nobody can shoot back at him. With the exception, had there been artillery, and you keep this in mind too, I always forget this one. If a unit moves to within 3 hexes of an artillery battery, or just any artillery, the artillery can shoot at him. So keep that point in mind. I always, you know how many times I've let a massive stack of infantry move into something and I didn't fire at them. All right, so now we've got one more regiment over here to move. So we're going to move him in 1, 2, 3. All right, and we're going to let him fire. So he's going to fire at that 6 up there. So he's got 4 rifles. Let's look at our chart here. Where's our rifles? Got to stand up again. Sorry. All right, so our rifles they have a range of 5. Now, of course, they're not very good out to 3. Once you get out past 3, they're not very potent. But you never know what you might hit. All right, so they cannot use prepared fire because they moved. All right, so they're going to get a +1 at point blank range. So he's got a strength of 4. That unit is sitting in the clear. So there's really nothing. I got to keep that attack marker. Keep that on him. All right, so he's sitting in the clear, so it's going to be a 4 + 1. Nothing special. So we roll a 7, which converts to an 8, all right, on the 4 table, and that is a capital D. All right, so when you get a big D, that means there's no die roll. The unit that you're shooting at is going to be disrupted regardless. Okay, So let's let him fire back. He's got 6 strength and he's European rifles, ER. See what the ER is. And he's going to get prepared fire probably. Yep, he can prepared fire. So he gets a +1 for the range and a +1 for the prepared fire. So he's going to get a +2 and he's a strength of 6. All right. So we're going to go to the 6 to 8 table. We roll. We roll an 8. He gets a +2. So that's going to be 10 on 6 to 8. And that is a 1D. All right, so we've done some damage here. All right, so he has disrupted. Sorry. He has disrupted, and he took a loss. Find me a marker. All right, he's disrupted, and he took a loss. All right. So, there you go. You just had your first combat casualties. Now, let me tell you how casualties in this game work. You don't get a whole lot unless you get massive small arms fire or close range artillery fire. Keep in mind in this game, too, that the standard rule for artillery is they can't move within 3 hexes of an enemy combat unit. Okay? I think that's, because you hear a lot of them, it gets explained a lot about, artillery crews got smarter. They knew better than to get in there close like that. Plus, I think it prevents you from moving up in there and just firing a massive blast with a bunch of cannons at one time. So keep that in mind when you're playing. And there's optional rules for that, too, that you'll find in the 2019 living rules. All right, so we've moved that entire regiment in there, or that entire brigade is moved. So now we're going to do our shock combats. All right, so if it's adjacent to a unit that's shocking, you have to attack it. You have to shock it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to, if I want to use, all right, if I want to shock with this 8 over here into that 6, all right, that's fine. Nothing else has to happen, all right? But if I wanted to shock with that middle unit into the one with Carol on it, then this unit over here has to be shock attacked by somebody because he's in his frontal hex. All right, so the odds are you would shock with him, and he didn't fire, so he's going to get a charge bonus. So you would shock into there with him, and he would have to shock here. This guy, he's not going to shock anything. We're just going to cover over here. Oh, I was going to say, too, about the disruption. So both of those units are disrupted. If they get fired on again, and this is where most of your casualties will come from in this game, since they're disrupted, if they get fired on again and they get another disruption and they don't pass the cohesion check, you lose a strength point. You have what's called a second disorder table. Where's that? All right, here's your second disorder table right here. And that'll tell you when a unit receives a second disorder. Yeah, I've been saying disruption. I'm sorry, it's disorder. What action you take, depending on how they received it. So if it's like from fire combat, you even got friendly fire in this game. So if they receive it from on the fire table, your cavalry and infantry, they'll lose a strength point and then they'll retreat 1 to 2 hexes. And your artillery, they'll just lose a gun. And yes, artillery can lose gun strength points from small arms fire. All right. So, okay, so you've seen movement in attack mode. Now remember, if these guys were in advanced mode, they couldn't move in there adjacent. They could only move to within 2 hexes. All right, but they're in attack mode, so they want to shock. So let's do a shock. We're going to do the middle one here since he was a charge. All right. All right. So we're going to find out. Let me get my tweezers here. All right, so we'll go through the shock results here. I know this is kind of hasty, and I apologize if any of it's not clear. You can question me later on that or whatever. If I don't cover something or you're not clear about something, you can ask me. Or even if you post it on one of the videos we have in the BGG, I know one of the big dogs, they can answer it for you. All right, so we know Carol's in advance. I'm going to separate these units here so you can see this. All right. So these 2 units here and that leader, they are going to shock assault this unit and that leader. All right. So you go to your, there's a whole page on the player's aid card for shock. All right, let me find it. All right. Get the dice out of the way here. Okay, so let's go over here. So you have shock, resolution, procedure. All right. So once you determine that you're actually going to shock combat. All right, so you designate all the targets of shock and charges. Okay, so we know that the 2 4s and leader, they are charging. And in order to cover this guy here, the 10th Virginia is going to shock the 110th Pennsylvania. They're not charging, they're just shocking, okay? All right, so we're going to do the charge first. All right, you're going to perform retreat before shock. If a unit wants to retreat before shock, like infantry, you don't want your infantry to stay. Now, if it's charging cavalry, you're not retreating, okay? If it's artillery, you're not retreating. But infantry, cavalry, or dismounted cavalry, that is the defender, they can retreat, okay? And it's just a 1 hex retreat, and they receive no withdrawal fire because they're trying to simulate the fact that these guys are on the run. The Confederates are on the run to get in there. So they've already shot anyhow. Or no, these guys haven't shot. So they're on the run with fixed bayonets trying to get in there. So there's really no time for them to stop, change, and fire. So if you wanted to retreat that guy, you could. And I think you have to do a universal disorder die roll or whatever once they retreat back. So you could, any one of these 2 infantry units that are getting ready to be shocked, they could back off. So let's say, he didn't want to fight him because he's disrupted. He could back off 1 hex. Okay. Now that unit, though, he gets to move up in there because that hex was vacated. And because he was shocking, he was charging, he was running into that hex anyhow. But then that would end it for that unit. He can't do any more. All right. So let's back him up. All right. So let's do that charge right in the middle. All right. So those Union guys, they got a good morale, good cohesion. They're not going to run. They're going to fight. Plus, they got a leader with them. All right. So no retreat. So the green attack, there's no green attacker in here. If these Confederate units were green units, which you'll know it, they'll have a big G beside their cohesion. You'll have to roll to see if they can even pull this off. And let me tell you something. That roll is hard to do. So, all right. So then we'll go down to defender's pre-shock cohesion check. All right. So that defender, he has to roll to see if he's even going to stay in there. And there are die roll modifiers for that. So we know his cohesion's a 7. All right. So we get in here to the defender's pre-shock die roll modifiers. All right. He's going to get a minus on the die roll per rank of his leader. If he's being flank attacked, he will end up with a plus. Or if it's cavalry charging him, he'll get a plus. All right, so he's got a leader with him, and his leader has, when they say rank, it's the number of stars. So Carroll has 1 star, so he's going to get a -1 on his die roll. So he rolls a 6, which becomes a 5, which is lower than his cohesion of 7. Okay. So he's good. He's going to stand. All right, well, now that we know he's going to stand, the next turn is he gets to do fire. So the fire is the same thing as you did in the regular fire combat. So we're just going to, we'll say we rolled and he didn't do anything. He rolled like a disruption and the Confederate unit passed the check, so he's good. So now we're going to have the combat. All right. So we're going to resolve the shock combat. Determine the shock die roll modifiers. All right. First thing first, excuse me, is you want to do your odds. So we've got 8 points attacking 7. Okay. So the odds are they'll just be 1 to 1. So we'll come down here on this chart, the odds ratio, 1 to 1. Well, and you'll see that over here in this other table in a second. So there's no modifier there. It's just straight up. All right, so then you come over here to your shock adjustment table right here. None of it's mounted cavalry. Excuse me, my goodness. Should have paused, shouldn't I? All right, so the odds ratio benefit for the attacker It's 0. Is the defender disordered? No, he's not disordered. Are we getting a charge benefit? Yes, because they didn't fire, so they get their +1 for charge. So now we got a +1. Are they stacked with an aggressive leader? And Taliaferro is not. He's neutral. See that N? He's neutral. If he was aggressive, it would be an A. So there's no benefit for that. And then the terrain chart. So they are going across a stream. So let's go. Yeah, the waterways in this thing, they're different throughout games. They have different things. All right, so a stream for shock combat is no effect. So that little stream doesn't mean nothing. All right, so we're still sitting on a +1 for the charge bonus. All right, what else we got? Charging the Lancers, that's for Gringo. Okay. Position modifiers, rear, flank, front and flank. Yeah, you get massive benefits for that stuff. All right, so for the defender, can he turn it backwards? So we know we got a +1. Odds ratio, nope, no effect. We already did that. Is any of the attackers disordered? No. Do the attackers not have a brigadier with them? Well, they do. They have Taliaferro, so they don't get that one. Is the attacker in advance orders? No, he's not. See, so there's your non-benefit if you were in advance and you were going to melee. Defender's not behind a breastwork, and this is not continued shock. And we already did the terrain chart. There's no fatigue. Yeah, we'll talk about fatigue too. So there's no fatigue on any of these units. So it's going to be just a simple +1. Well, your shock resolution table is pretty easy. Right? So you roll, and the Confederates roll a 5. +1 makes a 6. So you come down here and it says 6. Defender retreats. The defending unit retreats 1 hex and is disordered. Okay. So Carol and that unit, now I'm going to get my camera on it, they have to move out. So either one of their rear hexes, okay? So we'll move him up here. And now you flip him over, he's disordered. Okay, if they had taken a loss, anytime a leader's in a stack that takes a loss, you roll a dice. If it's a 0, the leader's hit. He's out. Pretty simple. Anything else, and he's not touched. All right, so he's disordered, and he's lost his hex. So now, Johnny Reb, you get to take that stack and move in there. All right? Okay. So you have this thing called continued shock. So if he had rolled in like, I think it's like a 10 or higher or an 8 or higher, you have where they have to continue to shock attack. And then you have the option where they can continue to shock. So if you get one of these things to continue to shock, he could just keep on going. He could shock the next unit. If he chased somebody out of there and sent them back 2 hexes, and he moved in there, and there was another unit in the front, and he had to continue shock, he'd just keep right on charging in to the next unit. And of course, you're going to get minuses to your die roll modifier the more you do. Okay, so all right, we're going to say that we're all done with this brigade. There's no more shock combat. We'll say that you did this one here and nothing happened. Right? We'll say that this guy, let's say he retreated. All right, and he moved in. I'm sorry. Yeah. So he retreated, he moved in. There was no combat. Okay. All right, so we're done. So we're done with shock. Okay, so that is one activation of a brigade. Now, if you have multiple brigades under Jackson, now you move on to the next one. Or maybe you want that artillery to fire, okay? So, artillery to fire. I mean, artillery has the luxury. They're always considered in advanced mode unless they are attached to a unit coming on as reinforcements that is in march mode. Then they work as if they're in march mode, just like the unit they're with. Other than that, they're always in advanced mode, no matter what the status is. They can fire. They can move. They can fire and move. They can move and fire. If they choose to move and fire and move, they'll suffer a penalty, and they only get half their movement points. And the penalty is like a -2 die roll or something like that. So then, so as part of Jackson's activation there, you could have the artillery fire, or they could move. They were within command range. So, and it's the same thing. You just remember one battery. All 3 of those units, because they're from one battery, they fire as one unit. And what it is depending on what type of gun you have in here. So there's TBs, there's Ls, and there's H12s. They all have different ranges and different effects. And you would take the worst one. So, you know, if they were shooting at 2 hexes and the TB's got a +3 and the L's got a +4 and the H12's got a +1, you would end up using the +1. But they fire as if they're one unit. They move as if they're one unit. You always keep them stacked. I didn't do that the first time I played one of these games, and then I saw it in the rules where they you know, because you figure you've got the battery commander's one commander. He's handling all of them. All right. And there are other rules in the games, not necessarily this one, where you can, you know, like Corps Artillery at Gettysburg. You have two sort of brigades in the Corps reserves for each corps, and you can attach them to a division, you know, or a brigade or whatever. So, and then they can function with that division leader when he activates. All right, so we're done. That was activation number 1. Okay, so one activation causes no fatigue. All right? And you need to learn the fatigue rules because they really add a realism effect. Because fatigue will affect the way the units perform, move, or fire, or whatever. All right? Or when they just completely become exhausted. So, all right, you get 4 activations in a turn, let's say. The first 2 activations cause no fatigue. The first shock combat within the first 2 activations causes no fatigue. Any additional shock combats, regardless, each one causes 1 step of fatigue. Now, fatigue does not affect individual units, it affects the whole brigade. So if one of these units were to do something to create fatigue, the whole brigade would get that same step of fatigue. And what it is, you place a marker on top of the leader. And there's 6 steps. I think it's okay, then 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't get to 4. My God, don't even get to 1 because it affects your die roll modifiers. Okay, so that unit, you know, we're done here, and this guy's shocked. The last thing in shock is your post-shock disorder. And there's a chart for that, but you can pretty much bet that attacking units, once they're done, they are going to disorder. Okay? So you'll flip them. Sorry, trying to hold. I'm not very good at this yet. So you'll flip them and put them in there, and now they're disordered. All right. Believe me, when you're actually doing this and playing this, it's not as tedious. You start to get into a routine after you've played the game a few times. You know, you'll start. And if there's 2 of you doing it, you're going to catch each other. So that's a good thing. All right. So I want to talk about disorder again. That's your killer. Your cohesion goes down, and there are some of these games where a disorder flips a unit over in his like I know there's in Gettysburg. The cohesion becomes 1. Do you know how hard that is to recover? All right, so on the next activation for Jackson, all right, so units can do movement with combat, or they can do rally, which those disrupted units, you would try to rally them. They could do ammo recovery or ammo resupply if they were resupplied, which you need to keep that in mind. If you roll on the fire combat table, if the modified die roll is a 5, you put a ammunition supply, I think it's a DRM -2 marker on the unit. Okay. You also have the optional rule of combined fire for units that are stacked together. So like if that 4 sitting right there, if he had another unit underneath him that was a 5, all right, you could combine his 4, and remember you can only fire 7 out of a hex. You could combine his 4 with 3 from the unit underneath, and there's your 7. That's an optional rule to use. It does make your fire combat a lot easier because you're massing those 7 strength points, and you're actually putting some fire on, whereas if the 4 fires and then the 3 fires, the odds aren't as great. So, I mean, if you want a bloodier battle, use that rule. Okay? I think you should. Plus, you'll notice, too, that units, you know, you might have a unit that moves, and then he fires, and he chases the unit he fired at out of the way, and you had plans to move another unit in there and maybe get into shock combat. Well, now he's not there. He's been chased away. But just remember that your fire combat is always simultaneous. All right, so we'll say Jackson's turn's over there. And now, here's where you do. You go back to your cup. And this is where you start your random draws. All right? So, and then now shield's activated. So now it would be Shields' turn. And we know that Shields gets 2. So probably no sense. I will explain withdrawal movement. All right, so your different versions of backing out or retreating, okay? Retreating from shock combat, you notice you don't get fired on. But withdrawal movement is where you have the ability to take a unit, it doesn't matter where they are, and they can withdraw to their rear hexes, 2 hexes. All right? And as long as it doesn't cost them more than 1 movement point, they don't have to roll for disorder. Okay? But if he were here, shoot. All right, so he's sitting right there. If he were to withdraw, the minute he starts his withdrawal, this guy here gets to shoot at him before he withdraws. So he might get slapped in the face and not even move but 1 hex. Maybe he takes a strength loss because he's already disrupted. All right. I'm telling you, I've seen some really, really bad results. I've seen units that I just had no choice. I had to withdraw them that were 3 strength points, and they went to withdraw, and somebody ended up firing a massive burst into them and took all 150 men and just destroyed the regiment. So withdrawal is one of those things where I try to use it if I'm screening something and I'm not really in contact. I might, instead of turning them, which, if they have full movement, your movement's going to be better. But if you don't want to have to change their facing, and you notice everybody faces a hex vertex. The only time you face a hex side is when you're in march order. Okay? All right, so he could have, let's say he withdrew 2 hexes. All right, he moved up to that higher ground. He fired at him, but he didn't have any effect. Okay? That's pretty much the basics of movement and fire and shock combat. Yeah, let's check the rest of the sequences here. All right, so let's say you went through all your activations. Everything's done. All the chits have been drawn out of your cup. And this again, remember, this is your fog of war because you never know who's going to go next. Other than that first one with the initiative. All right, so we go through all of that. End of turn is your commander move. So in this game, you don't have to worry about it. But if you have these core commanders, one of these red guys, like Lee or Ewell or Longstreet or A.P. Hill or Gettysburg, they would not move into this turn. You can't kill these guys. If an enemy unit gets next, you just move them away to, I think it's like the nearest friendly unit or whatever. But that's when those guys would move. And believe me, remember, those core commanders are part of your chain of command for orders. So if your core commander is not within range of his division commanders, they can't get orders changing their division orders. The division orders is your free method to put divisions into attack mode or advanced mode or whatever. If the chain of command is not complete all the way back to the core commander, you have to wait till a brigade activates. And then once, let's say when Jackson activated there, I didn't want him to be or Jackson got his activation. If this guy here, if I wanted to change to Taliaferro out of attack mode, I would have to do a brigade, a brigade orders change. And that's where that brigade commander's plus or minus brigade orders thing or whatever. So he has brigade orders rating, whether he's stacked with it. And then, that's where you might get that loose cannon thing. And the loose cannon stuff, yeah, here we go here. So if you try to change this guy from attack to advance and you end up rolling a 4 and got loose cannon, and see there's different results there, you would come over here to this chart and you would see what type of leader you had, and then you would apply one of these loose cannon effects. Okay? So there's all kinds of different things that might happen there. And like I said, random events has a whole bunch of stuff on it. I think those are different for different games. All right, so then you would do, so that's your commander move. Then you do replacement, and it's hard to get those commanders. This game, this really shows you what command was like in the Civil War, how trying to keep those divisions close so the corps commander could issue orders to all of them. Now, I've noticed now with my first day of Gettysburg play that Pender's starting to move off away from Harry Heath and trying to keep A.P. Hill in between the two of them and stay in range of both division. That's a trick. So you really got to pay attention to that. Okay, so then you go to replacement recovery phase. That's where you replace any eliminated leaders. You undertake in-reserve activities, including recovery from route, fatigue, and straggler recovery. I'm not going to go into details about that. You can read about how to apply that in the rules. Take your commands out of reserve, eliminate it. Yeah, artillery that gets overrun or whatever, you put an abandoned marker on them. And then after the next turn, if they're still abandoned, you flip it to abandoned 2. And at the end of that turn, if they're still abandoned, then they're eliminated. Okay. If they're recovered, or if they're not, like I say, you flip them over from 1 to 2. Your breastwork construction phase, with the new rules, that's at the end of 2 turns. Then any construction you have for breastworks they'll be finished. Combat effectiveness, all right, it's another one you need to watch. I don't know if there's different. I know the basics are, all right, if a regiment has taken more than 50% losses, you put a collapsed marker on it. If at any time, every unit, and of course once they're collapsed, they're disrupted too. And the only way you can recover them out of that collapse is to, like I say, go into reserve status and hope that they can recover strength points when they get the chance. If at any time all of the regiments of a brigade are on their disordered side, the brigade becomes combat ineffective. So there's another reason why you want to rally during an activation. If you really don't need to put a unit into a place to fire or put them into combat, try to rally. And like I said, you can rally each one of them. And they'll get a plus if their leader's with them or a leader's with them. And I mean, you want to get these guys out of disruption because, like I said, I find that most of the casualties get caused when a unit is disrupted and he receives another one. Or hell, he receives a disruption and a strength loss. Now you might lose 2. Now you might lose 3, depending on what happens. So if you can get them out of that, and you're not going to be able to all the time. And I have to say that this is a pretty good setup for how the Civil War probably was. I mean, I've been in combat, obviously not in the 1800s, but I know what I can't imagine what that combat was like, but I know what current combat's like. So yeah, the great rules on that. Get them out of disruption. If they're out of ammo, they're going to suffer a -2 die roll modifier. There's no special rule because there are no supply wagons like in older games. If they're not adjacent to an enemy unit, you just, on the activation, instead of doing anything else, instead of moving or firing or anything else, you just resupply them. Take that marker off. Okay? Watch your leaders. Keep them where they can control all their units. And like I say, the chain of command is the biggest thing in this game, staying within that. And it's movement points, not hexes in this game. On some games, it's the number of hexes. This one is not. It's the movement points. So the command range for Jackson is not 8 hexes. It's 8 movement points. All right. And yes, you can use the road movement benefits and stuff like that. All right. So combat effectiveness, we just went through that. And then you'll flip the turn record phase and you'll start all over again. All right. We'll do this as a base. Nomad, I hope this will help. If I need to be more detailed with something, just sort of breeze through this and then fire back at me. And anybody, just fire back at me on what you want me to be specific about. To try to cover this from top to bottom, I'm probably missing 1,000,001 things. And this is my first shot at doing something of this scale in an instructional environment. I'm doing it kind of hasty, just hopefully help somebody out. All right, so we'll try to get this up as soon as we can. And like I say, holler at me. Any comments, correct me, abuse me, I don't care. Just whatever we need to do to get the point across or to maybe help somebody with the rules out there or get them playing this. These are great games. Play them. You got it. You got to play it or you're going to be missing out. All right. Thanks for watching, gang.